Hello once again, I'm Don Jackson, and this is the heartbeat of the internet. Sun Bear of the great nation of the Native American Chippewa said, "I do not think that the measure of a civilization is how tall its buildings of concrete are, but rather how well its people have learned to relate to their environment and fellow man." I've always loved this story, and I quote, "I was parked in front of the mall wiping off my car. I had just come from the car wash and was waiting for my wife to get out of work. Coming my way from across the parking lot was what society would consider a bum. From the looks of him, he had no car, no home, no clean clothes, and no money. There are times when you feel generous, but there are other times that you just don't want to be bothered. This was one of those don't want to be bothered times. I hope he doesn't ask me for money," I thought. He didn't. He came and sat on the curb in front of the bus stop, but he didn't look like he could have enough money to even ride the bus. After a few minutes, he spoke. "That's a very pretty car," he said. He was ragged, but he had an air of dignity around him. I said, "Thanks," and continued wiping off my car. He sat there quietly as I worked. The expected plea for money never came. As the silence between us widened, something inside said, "Ask him if he needs any help." I was sure they would say yes, but I held true to the inner voice. "Do you need any help?" I asked. He answered in 3 simple but profound words that I shall never forget. We often look for wisdom in great men and women. We expect it from those of higher learning and accomplishments. I expected nothing but an outstretched, grimy hand. He spoke the 3 words that shook me. "Don't we all?" he asked. I was feeling high and mighty, successful and important, above a bum in the street, until those 3 words hit me. Don't we all? I needed help. Maybe not for the bus fare or a place to sleep, but I needed help. I reached in my wallet and gave him not only enough for bus fare, but enough to get a warm meal and shelter for the day. Those 3 little words still ring true. No matter how much you have, no matter how much you have accomplished, you need help too. No matter how little you have, no matter how loaded you are with problems, even without money or a place to sleep, you can give help. Even if it's just a compliment, you can give that. You never know when you may see someone that appears to have it all. They are waiting on you to give them what they don't have. A different perspective on life. A glimpse at something beautiful. A respite from daily chaos that only you, through a torn world, can see. Maybe the man was just a homeless stranger wandering the streets. Maybe he was more than that. Maybe he was sent by a power that is great and wise to minister to a soul too comfortable in themselves. Maybe God looked down, called an angel, dressed him like a bum, then said, "Go minister to that man cleaning the car. That man needs help. Don't we all?" Shigenori Kamioka wrote, "Find the seed at the bottom of your heart and bring forth a flower." When the radio show came to an abrupt end, one of the first things I did was to write the first draft of a book based on many of the things I had learned over the 28 years that the show was on the air. The book also contains personal memories of incidents that were later to inspire the many themes for the program. One of the excerpts in the book featured a true story about my grandmother on my father's side of the family. I remembered an old man with a scruffy white beard and tattered clothes knocking on my grandmother's door. I was maybe 7 or 8 at the time. My mother also saw the man through the living room window and suggested I stay close to her. My grandmother dried her hands on her apron as she listened to what the man was saying to her. He stared at the floor of her old veranda for the most part, barely making eye contact. My grandmother nodded her approval and he went around to the side of the house and into the large backyard. After removing his jacket and carefully folding it over a chair, he did a little weeding of her vegetable garden and flower beds. She watched from a rear window as he watered the plants with a garden hose. He carefully returned the tools to my father's old workshop. I watched with great curiosity while my grandmother began preparations for a small lunch in her kitchen. She heated up soup from a can, made a sandwich, and poured a cup of coffee from a pot that always seemed to be warming on her old stove. He had cleaned the dirt from his hands and the sweat from his face with the old garden hose before returning to the front of the house. Even though he probably hadn't had a warm meal in some time, he took his time and was wary of his manners. My grandmother sat in the chair opposite and they talked while he ate. My grandmother seemed more interested in listening to what he had to say rather than talking herself. After his meal, he stood and handed the tray back to her. I could see him thanking her for the meal, and he made his way carefully down the steps, disappeared behind our house. I ran to a rear window and watched him walk the length of the property and climb over the fence that separated our property from a railway shunting yard. He disappeared down onto the tracks and was gone. I asked my grandmother what that was all about. She just smiled and said that she was helping a man down on his luck. After my father arrived at the end of his workday, I told him what happened. We took a walk down to the back fence and he began feeling the wood beneath his fingers. 2 more posts and he found what he was looking for. He hoisted me up and told me to feel what was scratched on the other side of the post. There were a few markings. My father said they were etched some time back by a hobo who had come off one of the parked trains. My father basically said that it meant that other travelers could find a warm meal from the owner of the property for a little outside work. He said they were affectionately called Kings of the Road. Yes, some were not to be trusted. He said his mother, my grandmother, was a very perceptive woman. She had been raised on a farm, and as a young girl at the time of the Great Depression, she saw many men at the farm working for a meal or a little money. You must remember this was a very different, somewhat less dangerous period in time. A time when you gave a person, a stranger even, a fair chance, rather than being repelled and turn away. My father said his mother was always willing to help a poor lost soul less fortunate than herself. Arnold Betterman said, "My grandfather always taught us that the first step of wisdom is silence, and the second step is listening." Someone once said, if you don't keep walking, you'll never get to where you're going. Don't wait for someone to stop and carry you. You may weigh them down, and you both could fall. When you think the walk is too steep, press on, for there is no mountain that can't be climbed. When you see someone fall along the way, lend your hand. If someone lends you a hand, reach for it to help you get back up again. Hand in hand, together, each one helping the other, can make this journey as precious as the place that we are all striving for. One of my favorite authors was Mraz Shane. This is an excerpt from her Canadian bestseller, Hearts That We Broke Long Ago, and I quote, "So many of us spend our life feeling hard done by, thinking that we have been unfavorably dealt with by fate or family and friends, or that we did not get enough, whatever enough is, that we received less than our due, as if there was a due recorded somewhere that everyone had a right to, and that they issued at a store. And we never understood how lucky we are or how much we have to give, only that the world's against us and that life is hard. She goes on to write, I don't know why this is or why for some it isn't, nor do I know where some get the largeness of spirit, that bigness of soul that makes them able to reach inside themselves and give again. And others, lacking the bold heart and the firm step, remain in their jail and curse the gods. I only know that if you don't find the courage to give compassion, you'll have to find the courage to live without it. Because as certain as I can be that those who don't give it don't get it, and that's as firm a law of nature as there is, and that in the unknown depth of spirit where strange things are stowed away, where we have our ghosts in boxes and compassions locked up tight, there is one door marked open and another door marked shut, and the key to both is in our heart, and there is only one. This is a writing that's been going around the internet for some years. As the old man walked the beach at dawn, he noticed a young man ahead of him picking up starfish and flinging them into the sea. Catching up with the youth, he asked him why he was doing this. The answer was that the stranded starfish would die if left until the morning sun. But the beach goes on for miles, and there are millions of starfish, countered the other. How can your effort make any difference? The young man looked at the starfish in his hand and then threw it to safety in the waves. It makes a difference to this one, he said. This is a poem by Louisa Fletcher. It's called The Land of Beginning Again. I wish that there were some wonderful place called the Land of Beginning Again, where all our mistakes and all our heartaches and all our poor selfish grief could be dropped like a shabby old coat at the door and never be put on again. I wish we could come on it all unaware, like the hunter who finds a lost trail. I wish that the one whom our blindness had done the greatest injustice of all could be at the gates, like an old friend that waits for the comrade he's gladdest to hail. We would find all the things we intended to do but forgot and remembered too late. Little praises unspoken, little promises broken, and all of the 1,001 little duties neglected that might have perfected the day for the less fortunate one. It wouldn't be possible not to be kind in the land of beginning again, and the ones we misjudged and the ones whom we grudged their moments of victory here would find in the grasp of our loving hand clasp more than penitent lips could explain. For what had been hardest we'd know had been best, and what had seemed loss would be gain. For there isn't a sting that will not take wing when we've faced it and laughed it away. And I think the laughter is most what we're after in the land of beginning again. So I wish that there were some wonderful place called the land of beginning again, where all our mistakes and all our heartaches and all of our poor selfish grief could be dropped like a shabby old coat at the door and never be put on again. I have been told that this may have been written by a veterinarian. The author still remains unknown at this point. And I quote, "Everyone in the apartment complex I lived in knew who Ugly was. Ugly was the resident tomcat. Ugly loved three things in this world: fighting, eating garbage, and, shall we say, love. The combination of these things, combined with a life spent outside, had their effect on Ugly. To start with, he had only one eye, and where the other should have been was a gaping hole. He was also missing his ear on the same side. His left foot appeared to have been badly broken at one time, and had healed at an unnatural angle, making him look like he was always turning the corner. His tail has a long age been lost, leaving only the smallest stub, which he would constantly jerk and twitch. Ugly would have been a dark gray tabby striped type, except for the sores covering his head, neck, and even his shoulders with thick yellowing scabs. Every time someone saw Ugly, there was the same reaction. That's one ugly cat. All the children were warned not to touch him. The adults threw rocks at him, hosed him down, squirted him when he tried to come in their homes, or shut his paws in the door when he would not leave. Ugly always had the same reaction. If you turned the hose on him, he would stand there getting soaked until you gave up and quit. If you threw things at him, he would curl his lanky body around feet in forgiveness. Whenever he spied children, he would come running, meowing frantically, and bump his head against their hands, begging for their love. If ever someone picked him up, he would immediately begin suckling on their shirt, earrings, whatever he could find. One day, Ugly shared his love with the neighbors' huskies. They did not respond kindly, and Ugly was badly mauled. From my apartment, I could hear his screams, and I tried to rush to his aid. By the time I got to where he was laying, it was apparent Ugly's sad life was almost at an end. Ugly lay in a wet circle, his back legs and lower back twisted grossly out of shape, a gaping tear in the white strip of fur that ran down his front. As I picked him up and tried to carry him home, I could hear him wheezing and gasping and could feel him struggling. I must be hurting him terribly, I thought. Then I felt a familiar tugging sensation on my ear. Ugly, in so much pain, suffering, and obviously dying, was trying to suckle my ear. I pulled him closer to me, and he bumped the palm of my hand with his head, then turned his one golden eye towards me, and I could hear the distinct sound of purring. Even in the greatest pain, that ugly, battle-scarred cat was asking only for a little affection, perhaps some compassion. At that moment, I thought Ugly was the most beautiful, loving creature I had ever seen. Never once did he try to bite or scratch me, or even try to get away from me, or struggle in any way. Ugly just looked up at me, completely trusting in me to relieve his pain. Ugly died in my arms before I could get inside, but I sat and held him for a long time afterwards, thinking about how one scarred, deformed little stray could so alter my opinion about what it means to have true pureness of spirit, to love so totally and truly. Ugly taught me more about giving and compassion than 1,000 books, lectures, or talk show specials ever could, and for that I will always be thankful. He had been scarred on the outside, but I was scarred on the inside, and it was time for me to move on and learn to love truly and deeply, to give my total to those I cared for. Many people want to be richer, more successful, well-liked, beautiful, but for me, I will always try to be ugly.